11 years ago, a group of students began gathering in their dorms for times of extended worship.
Today, that humble beginning has grown into a global movement known as the Burn 24/7.
The founder, Sean Floyd, is with us today to talk about how worship has the power to transform the spiritual atmosphere.
Stay tuned and get ready to be inspired. Welcome to Lifeline Today. We're so glad you've joined us for the program because it's going to be an awesome time, Joan.
Yeah.
We're privileged to have Sean Floyd with us. Now, Sean Floyd is about 2006, the founder of the Burn 24/7, which now has become a global grassroots worship ministry.
And missionary ministry.
Prayer and missions included.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. He's a musician. He's recorded and released over 20 music albums. I've not even led one, you know. And he has co-authored 5 books. He's married to Kate, has 3 children, and you're going to hear some stories about that in this program. Just how he is taking his family to Iraq. They're actually going to be doing some ministry and missions in some of the most dangerous parts of the world in Iraq right now.
And how he's traveled to some of the most dangerous places in the world with the express intent of just worshiping with his team. And he'll share how things have changed and how people have changed.
Yeah. You know, we did an interview with him in our studios in our building, and it was just a great time because we were able to sit down. Then he ministered, actually, and we'll come back after and we'll talk about that. But he did minister, and there was a Burn worship event. Our building was filled, but he shared some additional things that happened.
Amazing stuff.
And some pictures and so on. It was absolutely phenomenal. So let's go into our studio right now. This is Sean Floyd. Welcome to Lifeline Today.
Thank you.
Good to have you here, Sean.
It's good to be here.
You're the founder of the Burn, right? The Burn 24/7.
Correct.
It's a global movement.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was, birthed in college, kind of on accident, really, to be honest. I had grown up in a really strong missions home. My parents were full-time medical missionaries. And then I really caught kind of the worship piece when I was in high school and was a part of several amazing kind of youth awakening revival things. But then in college, the two kind of merged. And in my dorm room with a bunch of wild college kids, we just started worshiping and praying one night. And we just caught this fire, this kind of virus, I like to call it. Couldn't stop and tried to, and it began to build. And soon it expanded out of my dorm room because it was not a co-ed dorm. So, girls and other people wanted to be a part, and it just became a citywide thing. And didn't know what to call it. Began to call it the Burn because our hearts really connected to the road to Emmaus story in Luke 24.
Yeah.
And so we called it the Burn, and here we are.
Wow.
12 years later.
Well, one thing you got to say, that's supernatural.
Very supernatural.
Yeah, that doesn't happen. A global ministry coming out quite spontaneous like that.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the idea, the principle behind it.
Yeah, so our heart is really, I think it began with the heart posture of returning back to the first love and just the whole, getting back to the simplicity of intimacy with Jesus and connecting in the secret place and, going to a university and even being a part of a ministry family. There was a lot going on and a lot of ministry and a lot of incredible stuff, but my heart really burned to connect with the Lord in a deeper way and to create space for him to come outside of 3 fast and 3 slow songs and maybe just the order of a service, but something a little longer where we could explore his presence and find places of encounter and worship. And so it just began to happen. And we have some basic DNA of the Burn, and we really believe in the Amos 9:11 prophecy that in the last days, the tabernacle of David's going to be rebuilt, which is later reiterated in Acts 15. Right. And that reality is pulled into the New Testament about this whole idea of creating a place where the presence of God can dwell day and night.
It's an interesting statement because the tabernacle of David, there was no separation between the ark, the manifest presence of God and the worshipers. And it's interesting that it is pulled into the New Testament in Acts 15. And so you're saying that's really in your heart. This is what the burn is partially about.
Yeah, we believe that, we believe that God is restoring this thing, that the global worship movement is just increasing, that it's going to literally, like Malachi 11 prophesies, it's going to fill every nation, from the rising of the sun to the place where it sets, that the incense will fill the nation. So.
Yeah. It's so interesting how it's gone global. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think, the nations were always in my heart. I grew up when I was 12 years old. I went on my first mission trip with my dad and got baptized in the Amazon River in Brazil and had piranhas swimming around my feet in the river when I got baptized. And the nations...
you're getting baptized, right?
Oh, well, you're going down. You just don't know if you're coming out.
Yeah.
So, so I always had a heart for the nations, and really... just like when you get in the presence of God, as you seek his heart, you gain that perspective, that his desires for the nations. So, we kind of have a tagline or a motto that from the secret place, to the public place, that God, that from the fire to the fragrance, from the posture of the first commandment to the second, so. Yeah. We can't do anything but go to the nations and but be global when we really get his heart.
So it's interesting how the doors have opened for you. Like some nations you go to are not that open, right?
Yeah, a lot of them are not that open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you do that intentionally.
Yeah, I mean, we really believe that the presence of God can invade any circumstance. And so I get together with my staff and my leaders every year, and we just dream with God. Okay, where are the darkest places in the world where your presence and your light isn't known, and send us there. And it's been amazing as we've responded to that. Doors have opened, and we've been in, some of the top closed countries in the world, including North Korea and Afghanistan and Iraq and other places where it's literally almost impossible to go. The Lord's really made a way.
Tell us some stories about that. How did you get into some of these nations? Are you free to do that?
Yeah, I mean, the stories are crazy. Each individual one is different. I guess I could share the testimony most recently of Iraq because for the last almost 3 years, we've had a full-time staff on the ground there. Mm-hmm. And in the midst of the terror of ISIS, the Lord has really opened doors for us to see such hope come into that part of the world.
Really?
And incredible favor with the government, with officials, with the army, with people that they may not understand. They know that we're Christians and believers, but they just see the presence of God in us, and they let us go into places where a lot of people can't normally go.
And who do you connect with there? Is there nationals that you connect with when you go?
Yeah, I mean, yes, our heart is really that the movement would be indigenized in every nation that it goes to. Yeah. So, we don't want to copycat a certain form or method, but we really want to see it become grassroots. So there's a lot of Iraqis that are involved, and that's Kurds and Iraqis and Arabs and all kind of people in the region. It's a representation, of what it looks like in that nation.
So you mentioned North Korea. Did you go into North Korea?
I did go into North Korea.
And how did you do this?
Well, it was a crazy situation where I was able to get kind of this last visa of I think the visa was under the guise of exploring cross-cultural experience, and there were a few Americans could get it. It was one of those where you're going to go in, you're not sure if you're going to come out, like a lot of Americans haven't. We really felt the peace of the Lord and felt like, me and my wife prayed about it and felt like I was supposed to go, and and it was an incredible experience. It was probably one of the wilder stories.
Yeah, I'd like to hear. Tell me the one that stands out in your mind. It really embodies your vision for the burn.
Well, I mean, I can share a bit on the North Korea one. I feel like, that would be the number one nation on Christian persecution.
Yes.
I think
Amnesty International says that too.
Right, and Voice of the Martyrs says that. I think if you are caught with a Bible in North Korea, your average life expectancy is 10 to 14 days to live. And so it's very intense place. It's hundreds of thousands of Christians have been martyred. But anyway, what's amazing is that how worship opens the door, and music especially goes to places where sermons can't go. And so we really use music as a tool, and we I brought in my guitar, and you know, we would just carry this atmosphere of joy around us wherever we were allowed to go. And long story short, we ended up being allowed to go to the Demilitarized Zone, the DMZ, which is between North and South Korea. A lot of people go and visit that area, but it's always from the South Korean side. I've never met anybody that's gone from the North Korean side.
Yeah.
But we came from the North Korean side into the DMZ, and we're over there looking at, you know, South Koreans and American soldiers, because there's about 10,000 American soldiers on the South Korean side. And they're just looking at us across the border with their eyes dropped, you know, their jaws dropped, that Americans are over there with guitars. But we were allowed to go into the room and release worship in this diplomatic room where all of the presidents have come between the two countries to try to bring peace, and it hasn't happened, and just lift up worship in that place, and it was incredible.
Amazing. You know, your principle here then is that your true praise, that is true praise that's God-focused, thrones-focused, throne zone-focused, is changing the atmosphere. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And changing it for the better, obviously.
Yes.
So have you seen that result in some nations?
Yeah, I mean, we believe, you know, just like Jehoshaphat, you know, in the Bible, and where the enemy was really, you know, chaos came upon the enemy as they worshipped, and just like David, as him and Samuel worshipped, and in 2 Samuel, that Saul was, you know, came under the power of God, even though he was an evil king. We do believe that worship changes atmospheres, and we've seen that around the world. Me and my wife have seen that in our own life, in our own family with our kids. You know, how sometimes our kids get crazy, and you have 3 little kids, and if we worship in our house, an atmosphere changes, and the same thing happens over nations.
You know, 6 years ago, my wife and I started our 4th ministry, and we built some big things, built big buildings, and done some large things, you know. And we asked each other recently, when we did this, about 6 years ago, what was on our heart? You know, what would we like to see in the ministry, this we consider probably our last ministry that we'll start. And we both never even hesitated. We said, we want to see the manifest presence of God. And our theme became pursuing the presence of God, of course, very worship-oriented. So we understand what you're saying, and it's an interesting principle. Not everyone understands it. Yeah. So have you seen some changes? For example, are you doing this in Washington, D.C., is that correct? Do you have a brand that's going on?
We're doing it in, I think, 200 to 300 locations around the world. And so we just got done partnering with a bunch of different ministries. About 3 weeks ago, we did a massive blitz on the capital city, Washington, D.C., and we had 50 tents that represented all 50 states, and we had worshipers and musicians from all 50 states come under these 50 tents that were all on the mall in between the Washington Monument and the Capitol building, and we worshiped for 3 days nonstop. And then the last day, we gathered everybody, about 20 to 30,000 people, and we just did 12 hours of worship and prayer, and man, things are, you know, I love to tell Canadians especially that God is moving across America. Don't worry. You know, God is not done with his dream for our nation, and I feel the same way about Canada, the things that God's doing here.
We need some changes in our nation. We're believing that the same power is present, and Joan and I, our conferences have the same theme, hope for the nation. We believe Canada has a destiny, and America has a destiny, nations have a destiny. And our nation needs that, So have you seen, you know, let me ask this. You got permission to do this on the mall, the National Mall? And
yeah, I mean, it was quite a process. A lot of permits being required, a lot of hoops to jump through, a lot of extra security we needed. But it was a lot of money that needed to be raised. But it's amazing the level of extravagance of this worship movement. I mean, we are asking God for big things. Of course, we were just in, north of Calgary last night in a little town during worship, 24 hours in a smaller building, and we love that, and that's beautiful. But we also love taking over stadiums. We also love filling Red Rocks Amphitheater, which is one of the most famous amphitheaters in the world, outdoor amphitheaters, and we did a whole day of worship there last month. It's never happened in history in that venue. So there is a thing of extravagance on this worship movement that I think is really beautiful.
It's amazing, isn't it? And I can see why. I mean, seriously, we're living in a day where the more you lift up Christ, the more his kingdom is known, right?
Amen.
Where are you going in the future? What's happening with the burn?
Well, we're just kind of still doing what we've always been doing, dreaming for nations and cities and new projects and initiatives. My family and I are we're still have a lot of trips and travel we're doing this year. We're really excited this Christmas. We're actually going to spend Christmas as a family in Iraq in a refugee camp. And so we're really excited about that.
Now, you've already made those preparations and it's approved to be able to do
Yeah,
that?
we were there. We were there last year. I brought my family there last year, and it's amazing. A big part of our heart, me and my wife's calling, is to really raise up family in the context of this revival.
Right.
And we believe it's a family move of God, and
Yeah.
I want my kids to grow up not having the fear of being afraid of the Middle East or afraid of Muslims or worried about this. We want really them to walk and grow in the power of God. So
Wow.
we're excited. We're going to do a big refugee Christmas outreach. We're raising $100,000 for it. It's going to be amazing.
Wow. That's amazing. That's ambitious.
Very.
And your kids are obviously just a big part of this.
Oh yeah, they love it. God gives them dreams and visions of refugee children, and they raise money in their piggy banks and go buy baby dolls at Walmart, and we stuff them in the suitcase and bring them to the kids. It's fun.
Now, your bio says you've co-authored 5 books.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your books.
Yeah, probably. I've done quite a few books. The first one I did was called Fire and Fragrance, which is, it's kind of the premise of the worship and prayer and missions movement, which I feel like are colliding.
Initially you wouldn't put those two together, right?
Yeah.
Historically either.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you do.
Yeah, it is. I feel like they're one and the same. I feel like they were never meant to be separated.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my first book. My latest book was probably I think the most incredible resource that I've been able to be a part of, and it's called Integrity, the Character of the Kingdom, and it's basically me calling mothers and fathers of the faith that I know have stood the test of time in the area of integrity to write down their stories of how they've battled through this and really release a precedent for a generation to walk, in this realm of integrity. And so it's a really special book to me. We just released it a few months ago.
Wow. Yeah.
Excited.
That's amazing. And you've done how many albums?
Lots of albums. I don't even know how many. Lots.
Yeah.
More than 15, maybe 18, something like that.
I've got to ask the question, when you're doing these burns and all over the world, does God give you spontaneous songs, new songs?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, I'm not at every burn that happens because there's
Obviously.
happening every weekend all over. But
Yeah.
I think the heart of spontaneous worship and that spirit of the prophetic and all that stuff, it's something that I love, and I think it's a great place to catch songs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the Tabernacle of David.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And it'd be interesting do you see the prophetic moving with the worship in these places?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we do. We want it to be a landing strip, for the prophetic song of the Lord, word of the Lord, decree. A lot of times we'll be worshiping in the middle of the night, and the Lord will lay a initiative on His heart, something to decree, declare, speak, prophesy, and when we love the atmosphere of the burn to have the freedom to do that.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Would you say that most of the people involved in the burn are a younger demographic?
I would say it's probably, when we started, we were all in our, early 20s. We didn't have kids. We were wild. We drank too much coffee, stayed up late and worshiped. And it has changed throughout the years as we've grown. It's matured. But I really love the fire of the youth and the wisdom of the old. And I think that we have a pretty good balance. I would say primarily it is a young you know, it is a younger movement,
Yeah.
but we're, you know, I'm not as young as I used to be, and so things have changed.
You know, that's something we really want to emphasize in this ministry that we're doing today, is the connection of the generations, and that we really believe that that's critical to the move of God that we're entering into, well, which actually already started. Globally, the move of God, I believe, has started in many parts of
Amen.
the world.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sean, for sharing with us, and we
Yes.
really appreciate that you're in Canada.
Love being here.
Yeah, and that you're doing these events, and you're doing one here.
Yes.
And so anything that you can say about the one here? Anything in your heart?
Oh, well, I'm excited about what the Lord's doing in Canada, and I'm excited that, you know, I'm really seeing a fresh hunger and passion. I've been coming to Canada probably 5 to 6 times over the last 10 years, a year, 5 to 6 times a year, and it's just
That's amazing.
increasing. It's just
Yeah.
the hunger for the presence of God and the ability to move beyond denominational lines and unify and come together, and so I expect the more of the same tonight, so I'm excited for that.
Awesome.
We want you to know that we have a powerful prayer meeting every week for you when you call the prayer center with your request. Why? Because we're serious about you. We know how precious you are to God. Just last week, we became outraged by the plague of cancer that's attacking so many of you. And you know, one of our intercessors was led by the Spirit to Genesis 18, where it talks about God, how he heard a great outcry, an uproar, a protest coming from Sodom and Gomorrah because of the evil there. And so we came to the Lord together as a team with a great outcry, uproar, protest against cancer. We said, Lord, come and destroy it, just like you did Sodom and Gomorrah. Every one of you out there knows someone who's battling cancer or some other deadly disease. Please call us and we'll make a great outcry before the Lord for you right now. Whatever your need, please call 403-942-0123.
Wow, Sean Floyd, what an amazing fellow. We had the privilege of actually hearing him preach after. There was a service in our facility and citywide, and it was frightful, and he preached about some of the extraordinary experiences that he's seen that are connected to changing the atmosphere with praise and worship, and then seeing the advancement of the gospel. One story he told about a man named Abraham, who was an Iraqi individual, probably extremist, and had been converted. And this man became very bold with the gospel, and he was told that ISIS had hired assassins against him. And he really was very fearful. And the Lord spoke to him and said, Abraham, I know the day you were born, and I know the day you will die. And in the meantime, you be faithful to me.
Wow.
And yeah, what a word, huh? So the man took courage of that. And so he just continued to preach boldly. And this is in the context of where Sean has gone and the ministry in the region where he's gone in the refugee camps. Then one day an ISIS terrorist did come for him and began to come violently for
Aggressively
him.
and violently.
Aggressively. And Abraham just began to speak to him the word of the Lord and began to tell him how Christ loves him. And in that moment, Joan, the power of God fell on the terrorist. And the terrorist fell to his knees and began repenting and received Christ. It was one of those phenomenal, miraculous conversions.
Seriously, just like the Apostle Paul.
Totally.
On the road to Damascus.
Yeah.
The Apostle Paul was a terrorist.
He was.
He was on his way to kill Christians.
Yeah.
And to, you know, put them in places
Imprison
of
them.
torture, and God interrupted him. And this is what happened to this Iraqi man, the assassin who was coming after Abraham, is that God just arrested him. And just like Paul, he became a believer. And I think that the interesting thing is that Sean said, things like this happen every day. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people are giving their lives to the Lord every day, and we never hear it on the news in this country,
Joan,
or in North America.
He said, don't drink the Kool-Aid of the modern day media. And I thought, yes, that is so true. They're not telling you what's really going on in the other parts of the world. Joan, he mentioned how where he's going, all these different places in Indonesia and so on.
Yeah.
And he's saying that now, out of a nation of 190 million, which is the largest Muslim nation in the world, he says there's 30 to 35, possibly even as high as 40% who are now born again. They are running to Christ. They're running to the gospel. And he's saying that this is what's happening globally, and the burn is a big part of that because it part of changing the atmosphere as they worship and as they praise. There were many other stories we don't have time to share, but seriously, I want to encourage you at home. I know we encourage you to call for prayer and that is good, but why don't you do this? Put on some powerful praise and worship.
Amen.
Put it on, turn it up, and let it permeate your house continuously. Turn off the TV and turn on some praise and worship and let the atmosphere in your home change. Joan,
That's right.
I like to do that. You know that. I like to get in my vehicle, my truck, and then I
Yeah.
like to go for a drive and I turn on the tunes of worship.
Yeah, right.
Nice and
And
loud.
it does change the atmosphere. You know, if you're discouraged, worship. It changes the atmosphere. If you're afraid, worship. If you're under a lot of stress, worship.
Yeah.
Because worship changes the atmosphere. And it takes your eyes off your situations and your circumstances and puts your eyes on a great big God.
Yeah.
Worship absolutely changes the atmosphere. There are so many more stories that we could tell you.
Yeah.
But, you know,
It's phenomenal what Sean said some stories about some Iraqi boys horribly abused by the ISIS.
and in training by ISIS for at least 3 years.
Yeah.
And they went into the refugee camp and he and his team began to worship in the refugee camp. And he showed us a picture, maybe we can get it up on the screen. He showed us a picture of these same boys,
Yeah.
and they were just radiant. They were so happy. Obviously, something powerful had happened in
Isn't that
their
amazing?
lives.
So something powerful can happen to you when you get into the
Amen.
presence of God, and it's not just a formula. It's getting into the presence of God through worship, and that's why I said turn it on in your home and let the atmosphere transform. Lord, I pray for those who are
Yes, Lord.
tuned into the broadcast today. We pray for their deliverance, their healing, just like with the
Thank you,
stories we've
Father.
heard through Sean Floyd. Lord, let these miraculous healings take place, miraculous turnarounds. And we just ask, Lord, that you would visit the homes that are here today watching this program. Visit them with your presence. Pray it in Jesus' mighty name. Hey, we'd love to connect with you. Contact our prayer center. And of course, Jill Mattis, her whole team, take your prayer requests. And of course, we're praying over you and following up. It's been phenomenal to hear all the reports, hasn't it
Yeah.
been? Thank you
It
for being a
has.
part of the program. Remember this, God is good
All the time.
and all the time.
God is good.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
This program is supported by viewers like you, and we thank you for your partnership. We want to hear from you. Send us your prayer requests, praise reports, and comments on the program. Be sure to visit our website for up-to-date information or get in touch with us by email or phone. And don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Dick and Joan are available to speak in churches and conferences in your area. To book them for your event, call 587-425-5720 or email info@dickandjoan.com.